G'day everyone and welcome to video 4.1.5 from the Legal Studies guy. No video in the corner due to some technical difficulties today, so I'm sure many of you will be very happy about not seeing my ugly mug. Our quote today from Teddy Roosevelt, former US president, is "Believe that you can and you're halfway there." We are past halfway there for legal studies in 2018. But in terms of getting through to the exam and doing the best that you can, a lot of it does centre around belief in yourself. I've seen plenty of students who are capable of getting better results than they do, and they are, who just don't have that self-belief, and as a result, they don't work as hard as they can. It's a little bit of a defence mechanism to be like, well, you know, I could have done better if I tried, ha ha ha. To try and, I suppose, protect yourself from what might happen if you try and fail. So have that self-belief, realise that you can, and you can do better, and you can do well, and you're halfway there. So 4.1.5, our key knowledge point for today is the significance of one High Court case interpreting sections 7 and 24 of the Australian Constitution. So we're starting to talk about cases, and in particular, cases involving these two sections of the Constitution. Our key skill is to discuss the significance of High Court cases involving the interpretation of the Australian Constitution. So this skill covers multiple knowledge points. So we'll talk a little bit about the skill at the start and at the end. Essentially, today we're going to be able to answer what happened in one High Court case involving sections 7 and 24. Pretty simple. We'll look at the facts of the case, what the decision was, and what impact that had. First of all, though, the next 3 dot points are all about High Court cases. So section 7 and 24, then we look at one impacting the division of lawmaking powers, and then we finish off with one regarding the external affairs power. What we need to do when we talk about a High Court case, so the information we need to include comes under these four headings. So what you need to do is you need to briefly outline the facts. What was the name of the case? Who was involved? What was the lead up? Generally at this point, we're talking about, you know, what did one party do so that they had standing, so that they were affected by a law and they were able to bring the lawsuit. Then you go into the legal issue, and this is really, really important. This is where you lay out what is Party A claiming and what is Party B claiming, and how are they linked to the Constitution. So maybe Party A saying that this part of the Constitution means this, and Party B saying, no, we think this part of the Constitution means this. So what are the two legal arguments being made? Then you go into the decision, usually a pretty short section, but obviously vitally important. Who won? So did the High Court choose Party A's argument or Party B's argument? And then importantly, and the most important section, as I say here, is the impact. So what is the lasting effect of the decision? So what impact has that had long term? So usually in terms of precedents set and how they're followed in future cases, but also in terms of what the government is able to do moving forward. So what impact has the decision had on the lawmaking powers of government, federal, Commonwealth, etc. So effectively, facts, legal issues, decision, and impact is what you need to cover. We'll look at an example later on. Maybe if you wanted to, an easy way to remember to do these things is to come up with or turn this into an acronym. So make FLDI stand for something. I had a class a couple of years ago. We decided FLDI meant for the love of deep impact, which is a horrible meteorite movie from about 15 years ago, and we watched the trailer in class, but you can come up with your own acronym for that to remember, to make sure that you briefly summarise the facts, you put forward what each party is claiming, so what's the legal issue in question, you obviously state who won, and then you talk about the impact that had, because as you'll see from this knowledge point, the knowledge and the skills, we're talking about the significance. So significance is about what lasting impact it had. Why is it significant beyond just what happened in that individual case? Moving forward, obviously, and I skip back, we are talking about sections 7 and 24. So it's important that we actually look at what section 7 and section 24 say. So first up, here is section 7 of the Constitution, and obviously it's quite lengthy, and section 7 is just literally outlining how we elect members of the Senate. So it goes on to talk about there'll be 6 senators from each original state. The Parliament can increase or diminish that number. The original state should have no less than 6 senators, so on and so forth. Currently, they've got 12 senators each because as our population's increased, we've increased the size of our representative bodies. But I want to direct you particularly to a couple of words or a little phrase. The Senate shall be composed of senators for each state, directly chosen by the people of the state. So directly chosen by the people. If we then flick to section 24, we look at the House of Representatives. Again, this talks about how we break the nation up into electorates and how we vote, so on and so forth. There must be 5 members at least from each original state, so on and so forth again. But we want to go back to this first section again, and just again. The House of Reps shall be composed of members directly chosen by the people. So we see those 2 terms, directly chosen by the people and directly chosen by the people, included in both sections. And that's what we're going to unpack. What does directly chosen by the people mean? And this was unpacked and clarified in the Roach case. So what are the facts of the Roach case? Basically, the situation is it is 2006 and the Commonwealth passes a law, and that law prevents anyone serving a prison sentence from voting. So if you were in jail, if you were this person in here, you can't vote. Okay? An election comes up, you can't vote, you're in jail. Prior to this, the law would effectively been the same, but you are only prohibited from voting if you're in jail for a sentence of 3 years or longer. So if you were sent to jail for 2 years, you were able to vote when an election came up and you'd vote in jail. But if your sentence was 3 years or longer, then you weren't allowed to vote. So that was the distinction. So the law's changed and it just says anyone in prison, full stop, you cannot vote. At this time, there is a lady by the name of VCE Roach. She was serving a 6-year prison sentence. So she was unable to vote from the original law as well, but with this new law that anyone in prison couldn't vote, she was still unable to vote. So she's personally affected by the law as she's unable to vote. So she challenges it in the High Court. She says, they should not be able to stop me from voting. She said, Section 7, Section 24, directly chosen by the people. If I'm prohibited from voting, then the representatives aren't directly chosen by the people. So these were the legal issues at hand, and we look at a nice picture here stating democracy. What does Section 7 and 24 mean? What is the meaning of directly chosen by the people? And Roach's claim, as I said, is that the Constitution has an implied right to vote, that must be directly chosen by the people, which means everyone must vote. You can't stop me from voting just because I'm in jail. That was the argument she was making, and that the Act itself limited the representativeness of the government. So by removing this subsection of people and saying they can't vote, the government that's elected is no longer representative. And she said this is not in line with the Constitution. This is not in line with the Constitution. The decision was found in her favour. So Roach wins, but she doesn't win fully, if that makes sense. So the Commonwealth law that restricts every prisoner from voting is declared unconstitutional. However, the High Court runs with this line. In order for the government to be, and the Parliament, the House of Reps and the Senate to be truly representative, a substantial majority of the population must be entitled to vote. Not everyone. And this is a really clear distinction. To be directly chosen by the people, a substantial majority must vote. but not everyone has to. And this therefore created the legal basis for the Commonwealth to be able to determine who can and who cannot vote in elections within reasonable limits. And the High Court said that the government can actually take away your ability to vote if they have a substantial reason for doing so. So there is no implied right to vote. And the court held, removing the right to vote from all prisoners is excessive, and only those found guilty or convicted of a serious offence should be denied the right. And guess what they decided the serious offence was? A 3-year plus sentence. So the law restricting all prisoners from voting, invalid now, but the law just reverted back to what it was beforehand, which means that if you were in prison for a sentence longer than 3 years, you couldn't vote. So Vicky Lee Roach, for example, not able to vote, but other prisoners who were serving under 3 years, able to vote. So again, really clear here, the Commonwealth can remove your ability to vote if they have a substantial reason for doing so. So what is the impact of this? And we've got a nice big cross here because the impact is that they can take away your right to vote. Immediately, the law reverted back to how it was prior to the change, and that's how it is to this day. But the further impact is this underlined point here, which is super, super pivotal. The Commonwealth has the ability to exclude people from voting. The government is able to do that. That is how Section 7 and Section 24 have been interpreted. The government can take away your ability to vote if there is a substantial reason. And those are defined as, by the High Court again, if you're of unsound mind, so you literally just don't understand why voting, so intellectual disability might come into that, etc. If you've been convicted of treason, or if you've seriously violated community expectations, aka if you've been sentenced to 3 years or more in prison. These are the reasons why the Commonwealth can take away your ability to vote. High Court said if we take away people who meet those 3 criteria, we are still having a substantial majority voting, and therefore the representatives are still being directly chosen by the people. So Section 7 and Section 24 are still being met by our election process, but we can remove some of these people. Therefore, and I think this is the discuss element of that skill. So discuss how it's been interpreted, how it acts as a guardian of the Constitution. The significance is that, yes, you can have your ability to vote taken away, but only to a limited amount. So most people are able to vote. However, it isn't a cut and dry personal right to vote. So it's not like you don't have the human right to vote because it can be taken off you. There is no implied right to vote. And it is super important that when you look at the significance of this case that you include this. Okay? You're saying, yep, the majority of people get to vote. However, there is no right to vote, if that makes sense. So that's your 2 sides of the discuss. That's your exchange of opinions. The skill is, again, as I've just gone over, discuss the significance. So exchange opinions about the significance. And it's not so much looking at how it is significant and how it isn't, but it's just looking at, I suppose, what it did and didn't do. And in this case, with the Roach case, we'll look at that in a moment. Because this is a question that's actually in the VCAA sample exam. So this is one that they've said you might find on an end of year exam. And it's worth 5 marks. And it says, referring to one case, so we know straight away, we see 7 and 24. We know that our one case is Roach. Discuss how the High Court has acted as a guardian of the Australian Constitution in its interpretation of Section 7 and 24. So how has it guarded the Constitution? And pretty simply, if we exchange our opinions for discuss, it's acted as a guardian because it's allows the majority to vote, but it almost hasn't acted as a guardian in the sense of there is no implied right to vote. Okay? So this is what a sample answer might look like. Note the length of this, and I think there's definitely scope in this answer here to drill down into the facts a little bit more and try and simplify the start, because this is the key part of our answer here. It's this part of the answer where we are talking about the impact of the case, and then here is the facts and the legal issue. Sorry, here is the facts. Here is the legal issue and the decision, and then this is the impact. So you can see how I've used that structure. Facts. Quickly stating what sections 7 and 24 are, directly chosen by the people. I identify the case, Roach versus Electoral Commission. VCE Legal Roach brings a case after the Commonwealth passes a law which restricts anyone from voting. Roach had standing as she's serving a prison sentence at the time and was therefore restricted from voting. So pretty simple facts. Law restricts all prisoners from voting. She's a prisoner. She brings a case saying that the law is unconstitutional. She claims that it's unconstitutional as it restricts Section 7 and 24 and argues that these sections imply a right to vote. That's the legal issue. That's her claim. The High Court found in favour of Roach, agreeing that this amendment did indeed restrict Section 7 and Section 24, but there was no absolute right to vote in the Constitution. So the decision. So facts, legal issue, decision, and then the impact. And this is where we go into a little bit more detail, because this is where we're getting like a couple of our marks as opposed to just one. The High Court acted as a guardian of the Constitution in this case as it clarified the meaning of Section 7 and 24. Clarified is a super, super good word to use. Okay? It cleared up what directly chosen by the people means. It found that the Commonwealth has the ability to exclude people from voting, provided there is a substantial reason to do so. The High Court found that the majority of the population must be able to vote to ensure Section 7 and 24 are met. So again, referencing Section 7 and Section 24, talking about acting as a guardian of the Constitution, so referring back to the prompt as well. So making sure that I use all of that key vocab the whole way through. However, so showing that I'm exchanging opinions, the High Court found that there is no personal right to vote as it can be removed in limited circumstances, therefore resulting in the Constitution not having an implied right to vote. So making sure that I fully articulate the impact. Yeah, great. Substantial majority are able to vote, guardian of the Constitution, this is what it means. However, didn't find an implied right to vote. So we don't actually have that personal right, and it can be taken away from us with substantial reason. Some great links to go to. I'll post these below. So a newsletter from the Australian Electoral Commission about the changes is from back in 2007, but it's about the 2006 changes and talks about the Roach case leading to the changes being repealed and going back to the old system of 3+ years. And then just another Australian Electoral Commission site on Australia's election history. So you can just look through our election history, how it worked, when we raised the number of people in each house, etc. In conclusion, a little bit wordy today, lots of information in those slides, so hopefully you were able to pause and go over in a bit more detail and take some notes down. But when we are talking about High Court cases, we do need to get a lot of that information, have all of the context about what was going on, and then really, really practice our ability to break that down into the facts, the legal issue, the decision, and the impact. A really good way to do that is to get cue cards like you would for a speech and just literally jot FLDI down the side of the cue card, and in that limited space you have, trying to shorthand just fit a case onto that card. So the idea being that you're learning to try and synthesize your information into the smallest form possible. At the end of the day, hopefully you can tell us in some detail what happened in one High Court case involving the interpretations of Section 7 and 24, that being the Roach case, and the clarification, again, keyword clarification, of what directly chosen by the people means. As always, feel free to give us a review, leave some comments on YouTube, subscribe, all of those things. I hope you're having a fantastic school holidays if you're watching this at the time. If it's exam revision, I hope everything's going just super. Make sure you look out for video 4.1.6, which will be up soon as well. Ta.